History of Uganda money. The British East Africa is an area in the African Great Lakes from Indian Ocean inland to the border with Uganda in the west that was controlled by British in the late 19th century. It grew out of British commercial interests in 1880s and remained a protectorate until 1920 when it became the colony. Kenya. European missionaries began to settle in the area from Mombasa to Mount Kilimanjaro in the 1840s under the protectorate protection of Sultan of Zanzibar. In 1886, the British government encouraged William Mackinnon, who had agreement with the Sultan. He owned a shipping company that traded extensively in the Great Lakes region, establishing the British influence in the region. He formed a British East African Association, which led the Imperial British East Africa Company. That was chartered in 1883 and given the original grant to administer the dependency. It had administered 240 kilometers, 150 miles of coastline stretching from River Juba via Mombasa to German East Africa. That was leased from the Sultan. When the company began to fail, the British government then proclaimed a protectorate in 1895, transferring the administration of the foreign administration to the Foreign Office. And in 1902, administration was transferred to the Colonial Office. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit the like button so that you don't miss your daily source of news on Uganda. Let me be clear and let's get started. The East African shilling was the currency issued in British-controlled areas in East Africa from 1921 until 1969. It was produced by the East African Currency Board. It is also a proposed name for a common currency that East African Community planned to introduce. At that time, the rupee was the currency of Britain East African colonies and protectorate between 1906 and 1920. It was divided into 100 cents. The rupee replace the Indian rupee that was put in action in 1920. The rupee was then revalued against sterling to a peg of 1 rupee, 2 shillings, and 1 florin. In East Africa, the same year, they replaced rupee. They replaced rupee with East African florin, the currency not worthy because it included the world's first aluminum coin, the 1907 1-cent coin. In 1906, they introduced a 25 and 50 cent. Then the aluminum 1 cent and copper nickel 10-cent coin in 1913. They also introduced half-a-cent coin, 5 cents, that replaced aluminum in 1909. The same year, they decided to introduce notes by the government of East Africa Protectorate in the domination of 5, 10, 20, 40, 100, and 500 rupees in 1920. The East African Currency Board issued 1 rupee notes before it was replaced. 1 rupee note before it was replaced between 1919 to 1921. The East African Protectorate and Uganda were affected by a currency crisis known as the East African Rupee Crisis. The currency had a setback due to the post-war period. One of the reasons was stagnation in trade and decrease in international price for East Africa export of commodities. Kenya coffee and steel and sisal fell by 50%. The important reason was the dramatic appreciation of the Indian rupee against pound sterling. British settlers in Kenya were affected by the currency instability as their coffee and sisal to Great Britain. Their honey was in pound sterling and their capital was stored in Britain. These people were affected very badly, but still they had their money stored in Britain, currency. But in Kenya, they had to pay wages and death in rupees. Their return were drastically diminished. Indian traders, on the contrary, dealt in sterling only as buyers, whereas they stored their capital in rupees. The new value of the rupee strengthened their position in East Africa. During the East African rupee crisis, the missionaries raised their voice in 1921 after the change from the East African florin to East African shillings. They decided that 1, 5, and 10-cent coin be marked down cents of a florin to cents of a shilling without notice or compensation. The decision to mark down cents was arrived at for various reasons. Minting millions of new coins was impossible, given the new shilling needed by the settlers and traders had to be first minted and put into circulation. It was calculated the loss for every African family would have been a minor loss of about 2 shillings per family. Africa had to bear the cost of the new currency change. Strong protests came from the missionaries and humanitarian group for the disastrous offer petition were sent to East African authorities and to the Parliament in London. In order to stop the introduction of the new provision, the East African shilling became the most convenient currency for settlers, whereas cents had become, since the introduction in 1906, the currency used by Africans. We had mainly cents, small denomination currencies that could more easily circulate than the rupee in places where income and prices were low. In 1966, they introduced new coins in the denomination of 5, 10, 20, 50 cents, 1 and 2 shillings, 5, 10, and 30 cents. Coins were struck in bronze, with the higher denomination struck in cupro, nickel. The 2 shilling was only issued that year. In 1972, cupro, nickel, 5 shillings coin was issued but withdrawn from circulation. It was copper-plated steel. We don't know why it was withdrawn, but they managed to replace bronze. Evidence why they replaced the copper plated points to a variety of currencies used in the kingdom of Uganda. In central Uganda, before the colonization, backcloth, beads, and cinder, and ivory disc, 𝙏𝙝𝙖𝙑, were in use before the arrival of coastal traders. When the coastal traders came, they introduced cowrie shell, simbi, in the early 19th century. Different currency were gradually adopted for a variety of transactions. The Baganda king controlled currencies by limiting the amount in circulation. And believe me, they control the money, the king of Uganda. And that tells you that if a king can control the circulation of money at that time and moment, then you knew that our kingdom and our chiefdom were strong. Then you know that within those kingdoms there were also people who knows what they were doing. You control currency by limiting the amount in circulation. I think there are better economies than we today. If you see how they control amount in circulation and enforcing their acceptance by levying tributes and fees, even after the British introduced ban on cowrie shells in 1901, the Buganda court continued to levy fines and taxes in both shells, where hence chiefs were paid in rupees. You can see how the Uganda shilling, Uganda money managed to develop. The Bank of Uganda introduced notes of 5 shillings, 10 shillings, 20, and 100 shillings in 1973. 50 and 1,000 shillings in 1983. 5,000 in 1985. That shows you how the money system really did develop. And I was wondering all this time, and I was asking myself, why did the British decide first to use rupees as Indian rupees before moving to shillings, to cents? I remember when I was going to school, if they give me 5 cents, I was the happiest man in the world, because that 5 cents could buy a lot of locally made cassava bread in the market for lunch. What an experience. Thank you for listening. And remember, I will be back.